So coming to the next question, Sakshi, throughout your long professional journey, is there any specific growth story or some growth stories that come on top of your mind, which you would like to share?
So several interesting stories throughout. I'm a few that I want to definitely talk about. I think one was early on in the telco days. So I've worked with Aircel Telecom, of course. Now telecom market has completely changed. We're back to pretty much a three-player market. When we entered, we were around the eighth, ninth brand in the market at that time, and within 2 years, it had become like a 12, 13 player market, which was unimagined in telecom like at least 10 years back. And it was a hard battle. Everyone was battling for that consumption share in India, and coming as a regional player and going national. I was part of that journey for about 3-4 years when we took that spike. So we actually moved from eighth, ninth to pretty much like the fourth, fifth position in the country, and that was a hard. Within 2 years, we actually 2 to 3 years we made that switch. So there were a lot of interesting things that we did around that time, which were industry firsts. One thing that was very close to me, and I worked very closely on it for about 2-3 years, was of course the core marketing, and there was a lot of interesting stuff that was happening there. But we actually chose to take a slightly different approach at that time on by building CSR into a marketing communication tool. So while that was not the first choice at that time, we of course the intentions were always to do good and to solve for a problem statement, but it actually turned into something quite unimaginable even for us, right? So the campaign I'm talking about is actually Save Our Tigers. It was a very interesting campaign at that time, and even today I think a lot of people recall how it actually transformed the way a lot of Indians thought about things of national pride, right? And those were stats that were not known to people at that time, that tiger population in the country is pretty much like almost going to die. And it was a rude shock for a lot of people across the country, and we literally we rallied the entire country to come together for a cause. And that for me was very heartening to be part of that for the 2-3 years that I worked on that. And not just the cause, but it actually had a very wide impact on the brand as well. So while we didn't go in and did not imagine the magnitude of that change that it would bring for us, we went in thinking we should do this as a positive effort, and we hoped it would make some change. But the kind of phenomenal response that we saw in terms of people coming together and how cause marketing can actually change the way the perception of your brand. It was an eye opener for all of us, right? As part of the campaign, we actually sort of grew with it as well, like our learnings. So that was my first learning of how cause marketing can switch perception for brands. It was not that Aircel has any sort of negative perception, but we were like a late entrant into the market. So to create that room for us, that campaign really shifted. Of course, there were a lot of other pieces and functional pieces that we solved for, both at the product level and so on. We launched a lot of new products into the market, which were again industry first. But this really swung the needle in terms of how emotionally people were connecting to the brand. They actually felt that we were doing something good, and they wanted to be associated both with the cause and the brand. So that for me was a very interesting shift in the way audiences perceived us before and after we sort of brought out that campaign. And sort of definitions of cause marketing after that started changing. A lot of brands started adopting that strategy in terms of building muscle around how do you take causes out to people in a manner that also brings stickiness and affinity for your brand, and not just as a check in the box CSR activity that you're doing, which you were which was compelled to do as an organization, but how can you shift really the boundaries. Then a lot of other interesting things for me. The second one was the next company for me was so I worked briefly, actually not briefly, for almost 3 years with Ritu Kumar, which was one of the legacy Indian designers, and it was again a very wonderful experience moving from a corporate structure to work with sort of family business, right, proprietor run company. But the shift there, right, a legacy company shifting into transforming into a urban young India first company, and I was part of that journey. Again, a very interesting shift, I think, getting everyone together onto that thought that we need to actually shift. the legacy focus into, a young urban brand that actually attracts, like, again, across age groups, because the kind of fashion that they did, they had fashion for all age groups, right? So there were 3 or 4 brands that I was working on at that time. Of course, the couture label, which was the signature label that you use for occasions and weddings and so on. But we also launched a couple of other lines. But they were the first Indian brand to take the shift into digital. In this space, in the legacy and fashion world, in the Indian fashion world. And I was part of that journey to push them to take that switch. So we were the first ones to actually go on marketplaces and build our own e-com. Before that, of course, there were very small labels who were doing that in sporadic bursts, but we actually set the path for a lot of other than big Indian labels to start realizing that digital is a space to move. And a lot of other then brands followed suit, and you're seeing the change right now in that fashion industry. Like, pretty much all of them are now heavily digital. So, and within the 3 years that I was there and the 2 years, I actually, like, we saw our portfolio in terms of our revenue shift started to come in, right? Our digital revenues had actually grown to almost 20% of the overall turnover within like 2 years, of shifting to an e-com D2C sort of a model. And that foray helped actually push the company into a lot more newer audiences, a lot more younger audiences sort of got attracted to the brand. So that was an interesting shift, how to move the needle for the business and brand, and also to move it in a legacy brand and also a family run sort of a setup, right? So convincing multiple stakeholders to move that and get that going. It was an interesting way of driving fashion adoption in India. And of course, then, yeah, another journey with Payback and then Bharat Pay. Again, some interesting notes there. I think I was part of the shift that we brought in terms of launching postpay in India as a brand, right? So again, that was transformational, a new kind of category, bringing it to Indians. So very interesting play there in terms of shifting how we're adopting credit in a much more digital manner. So that for me again was a new category and a new innovation, and how we brought that from getting it to millions of Indians across the country. So yeah, there are a lot of those interesting stories, and even with Glance, I just feel like the category itself and the nature of the business and the product that we are building, it's so unique, it's so different, that just getting users to realize that there's so much potential out there, right? Like today what we're doing is probably 10-20% of what the potential is out there of transforming screens. So I feel this journey itself for me is an interesting growth story. Like I'm going to be completing about 2 years here. In just the last year and a half, like the shift that we brought in the way users are consuming screens, and the kind of consumption behavior that they're bringing, both in terms of just surface behavior and also within that how we're consuming, right? Like, we can actually play that role of a digitally responsible platform that's actually telling you stop overconsumption, do it right, do it at the right time, and only enough what is relevant for you, and just make every glance, every moment so much meaningful for you that you do not have to get lost in the negativity of whatever is there on the internet. So I feel just, yeah, this whole paradigm shift in the way the product is there and how we're taking it to market is just a very interesting story in itself, and I'm sort of really happy to be part of this journey.